The Scarlet and Violet TCG base set is legal for tournament play on April 14th, which is the starting date for the European International Championships. My name is Luke, and I've been playing the Pokemon TCG for a long time. In today's analysis, I am predicting what the best and most popular decks will be for this tournament, and explaining the archetypes along the way. Let's get into it here on Beastcoast Pokemon. The most important archetypes to know about are Lost Zone Toolbox and Lost Zone Giratina, since they have been incredibly popular and successful in Asian countries which have already begun playing this format. There are many similarities between Lost Zone Box and Lost Zone Giratina, but the main difference is that Lost Zone Giratina focuses more on its namesake card Giratina VSTAR and less on a toolbox approach. Lost Zone Toolbox can be broken down further into several variants, but we'll keep it simple and define the variants by a simple factor of which Radiant Pokemon they play, Radiant Charizard or Radiant Greninja. Radiant Charizard is a great attacker, especially as the game goes on, since its attack will cost less energy thanks to its ability. Lost Zone decks with Radiant Charizard will typically look something like this, focusing on Sableye, Cramorant, and Charizard as the attacking Pokemon. Lost Zone Box decks with Radiant Greninja will include 4 Mirage Gate and some water energy for Greninja to use, but there are a lot of different Pokemon used between top performing lists. Cramorant and Sableye will be seen in every Lost Zone Box list. They're too good to not play. Other single prize Pokemon that are seen throughout successful Lost Zone Box deck lists include Snorlax, Miltank, Zamazenta, and Kyogre. Pokemon V, which are commonly seen in Lost Zone Box decks, include Dragonite V, Raikou V, Drapion V, and Galarian Zapdos V. Now that you understand the typical structure of Lost Zone Box with Radiant Greninja, you can apply that concept to Lost Zone Giratina. You'll see many similarities between Toolbox and Giratina variants. The Giratina deck lists just have less space for extra attacking Pokemon. Giratina V has 2 great attacks, one that draws cards and adds cards to your Lost Zone, and the other goes through effects, which can be useful against something like Miltank. Giratina VSTAR also has 2 great attacks, Lost Impact dealing 280, and Star Requiem, which instantly KOs the defending Pokemon. I'd expect 30% of the EUIC Masters Division to play either Lost Zone Box or Lost Zone Giratina. Figuring out which variant and deck list can take advantage against mirror matches will be crucial if the field is this cluttered with Lost Zone decks. There are new cards to talk about too, like Gardevoir EX. Gardevoir EX has been popular and successful in the Asian circuit as well. Gardevoir EX is a fine attacker, but its real strength is in its ability Psychic Embrace, which allows you to accelerate Psychic Energy to your Psychic Pokemon. This ability is the catalyst for both Shining Arcana Gardevoir and Zacian V from Celebrations, since they both have the same attack which scales as more Psychic Energies are attached. It's not uncommon for Gardevoir's damage output to reach the mid to high 200s, and Zacian V can feasibly deal 300 damage. Their damage is really only capped by their HP, since Psychic Embrace applies 2 damage counters each time it is used to attach an energy. Gardevoir EX decks take some time to set up, but are ultimately very strong a few turns into the game. Although I think the archetype hasn't reached its full potential yet, and likely won't until we have a larger card pool later this year, it is still a solid archetype that I expect takes up around 10% of the EUIC Day 1 metagame. Another new card that is sure to see play is Miraidon EX. Miraidon EX has been partnered with Regieleki EV and Regieleki VMAX for multiple reasons. Of course, Regieleki VMAX boosts the damage output of Miraidon EX, but Regieleki V actually has 2 really useful attacks itself. Switching Bolt deals damage and switches into a benched Pokemon, ideally a Klefki to turn off your opponent's basic Pokemon's abilities, and Lightning Wall deals 100 damage while mitigating 100 damage dealt to Regieleki V next turn. This lightning type deck can prove frustrating for Lost Zone decks to deal with due to switching into Klefki and mitigating damage, but since it is a known strategy, Lost Zone decks will have time to prepare for it. This is another archetype I predict will be around the 10% range. Back to older decks now. Lugia VSTAR and Mew VMAX are both very viable in the post-rotation format. Lugia VSTAR is now being paired with single-strike Pokemon such as Tyranitar V and Stonejourner, since Archeops can easily accelerate single-strike energies to them. Mew VMAX is seeing success with and without Meloetta plus Fusion Strike energies, and I'm not sure either variant is clearly better than the other. I expect Lugia and Mew VMAX to each take up about 8 to 12% of the Day 1 meta share at EUIC. The last major archetype I want to discuss is Arceus VSTAR. There are a few Arceus decks that I have my eye on, including Arceus Duraludon, Arceus Goodra, and Arceus Giratina. I expect each of these to see a bit of play, but I'm also intrigued by Arceus VSTAR with the new Armarouge. Armarouge can move fire energy from benched Pokemon to your active Pokemon, which works really well with Magma Basin, which attaches fire energy to your bench. This allows you to heal your Arceus with Charon's Care or Cheryl, and still be able to power it back up to attack in the same turn. Radiant Charizard and Delphox V both fit nicely into this variant as well. Altogether, I estimate Arceus V-Star variants will take up around 5 to 8% of the day 1 meta, but there are just too many options with Arceus V-Star to have an accurate guess on which variants will be popular and successful. At the time of recording this video, my best guess at what will win EUIC is either Lost Zone Giratina or a deck specifically designed to counter Lost Zone decks. Lost Zone Giratina has slightly less moving parts than Lost Zone Toolbox, making it more feasible to pilot to victory over the course of a 14-round best-of-3 event. It handles counters well since you can use Giratina V's Abyss Seeking to draw cards, and accelerate your Lost Zone in the face of something like Klefki or Empoleon V shutting down your Comfies. It also can stage comebacks with cards like Roxanne and Path to the Peak, as well as taking huge knockouts with Giratina V-Star's aggressive attacks. As for the rest of the archetypes I discussed today, I wouldn't be surprised to see one of each make it into top 16, and maybe some into top 8, with top 8 largely being Lost Zone, Lugia, and Mew. Pre-established decks often have an advantage in the early days of a new format, since players have spent more time on the deck lists and perfecting the strategies of the archetype. This is why I'm favoring the older decks over the new decks like Gardevoir EX and Miraidon EX. One final note is the results of recent online events played via Pokemon TCG Live with Scarlet and Violet cards legal. The Late Night 87 had over 280 participants. Lost Zone box decks took up over 20% of the field, with an additional 8% Lost Zone Giratina decks. The metagame was fairly diverse, with 7 different archetypes taking up 5% or more of the field, including the new Gardevoir EX and Miraidon EX decks. After 14 rounds of Swiss, the top 8 decks were 2 Lugia V-Star, 2 Gardevoir EX with Mewtwo V Union, 1 Mew VMAX, 1 Lost Zone box deck, which was actually myself, and a surprising 2 Shadow Rider Calyrex VMAX decks, which were almost identical to each other. It makes sense that Gardevoir EX did well alongside Mewtwo V Union, since Mewtwo V Union is an incredibly powerful card that can either one-hit KO with Final Burn, or spread damage to multiple Pokemon with Psysplosion. The Shadow Rider VMAX decks seem to be partially oriented around controlling the pace of the game, with Shadow Rider Calyrex V's Shadow Mist, Judge and Roxanne, Path to the Peak, and Hatterene V's Teleportation Blast to switch into Klefki. Of course, the deck also has incredible damage output potential in the late game due to Shadow Rider Calyrex VMAX's Max Geist. I'm interested to see if this new deck archetype will translate into IRL play. The Late Night 88 was held later that night and had over 400 participants. The top 8 decks were 3 Lugia V-Star, 1 Gardevoir EX with Mewtwo V Union, 1 Mew VMAX, 1 Lost Zone box, 1 Lost Zone Giratina, and 1 Lost Zone Goodra. The Lost Zone Goodra deck might be a bit of a surprise for some people, but looking at their matchups in this event, it seems they faced 6 Lost Zone box decks and 5 Gardevoir EX decks, which both ended up being positive matchups for Goodra over the course of the event. It will be interesting to see if these online event results influence what players play and prepare for at EUIC. Whether you think I'm a prophet of the metagame or huffing Lost Zone copium, let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. Thanks for watching here today on Beastcoast Pokemon.